Now from the University of Okoboji, it's Okoboji Broadcast with Jeff Thee.
Stand for Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'll now call the meeting to order. We do have one item to take care of before we get to the main. Council, we're holding a public hearing to open and consider bids for Bobcat rims. The hearing is now open and it's now closed. No bids. All right, so that takes care of that part of it. All right, now is the discussion for the proposed Highway 71 project with the Iowa DOT. Thank you guys very much for coming here. I know we've asked you a lot of questions and bombarded you with a lot of information in the past 6 weeks probably. So again, thank you very much for your time and for coming here. We really appreciate it. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Julie. She's been instrumental in pulling all these together.
Thanks, Mary. Yes, and thank you to everybody that's here tonight. I know it's a really busy time of year, but I do think it's really important. And kudos also to the DOT for making the trip over here. I'm hopeful that with maximum visibility on the plan, we can work together, roll up our sleeves, and come up with an awesome project that can be executed with public safety and the kind of our community needs in mind as well. So again, thank you all very much. We definitely appreciate everyone's willingness to be here, and your voices certainly are meaningful in this moment, so we look forward to hearing from you.
One thing when we do get started with this, appreciate questions only. If you've got comments or you want a discussion or something, please hold on to that until after the meeting is over. This is for the information, so we really do want just questions. Raise your hand, stand up, we'll find you and get to you. Thank you.
I think we should turn it over to you guys, let you present kind of this working process.
Thank you, Julie.
You bet.
Welcome, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you this evening. I appreciate you turning out for this discussion. That's really what we're after, is to share information this evening about the US 71 project as we do the reconstruction through your community. It's an important endeavor. It's a big endeavor. And as we've had contact with Julie, she asked some questions about if we'd come here and talk about other staging alternatives that we have besides the initial ones that we proposed. Tonight we'll be going through 4 staging alternatives that we have as we look at the project. That's not to say that any one of them has to be the final one. It is still an opportunity to work through this staging with this project as it's being developed. So don't think we're here saying, hey, it has to be this one. It's preconceived. It is an open discussion and there still is opportunity. I'll go one step further with Julie too. If there are comments, questions about specific accesses that are dealing with just your business, your property, and you want to have a conversation about that, we've always been open to that. Please reach out to us. Mike Myers and Council, Julie and others, they have our contact information. You can come see me after the meeting or one of the DOT staff will introduce you shortly. We'll be glad to have that conversation with you as well. We're going to introduce the folks from the DOT team first. Darwin Bishop, he is our district construction engineer, and as of now, are also our Cherokee RCE, so he may be the one that's up here in person doing the project. Tony Lazarovich is our district engineer. He won't be up here doing the project. He is planning on retiring at the end of July. Sorry, end of January. I'm trying to stretch this out. Want to come around a little bit longer. Todd Huyu. Todd Huyu is one of our project managers on this project and a staff engineer in Sioux City, the district attorney's office. As mentioned, I'm Shane Tinfoots. I'm the assistant district engineer. We have on the line with us a couple other folks I'd like to introduce. Dakin Schultz is our planner in Sioux City. And then we also have Austin Gates, who is our TISMO engineer, which deals with transportation safety management and operations. So staging and traffic flow is his specialty. I've also invited Greg Mulder from the Concrete Paving Association, representing the industry to give insight on what's possible, construction methods, timelines. So it's just not the DOT's perspective on this, with the industry who's actually going to be constructing the project and their perspective. The last member I'd like to introduce is Doug Howley from Shimmer. He is going to be leading our presentation portion of it. Any one of us may be answering questions as we go through the evening, depending on what the specific question is, and trying to get to a resolution of how we like to move forward with staging the project. And that's really the goal, to find something that we all can live with. There's pros and cons to each one of these alternatives. So I know you're probably going to have questions or thoughts about it, but I do ask to have Doug have the opportunity to get through the presentation before we go ahead and start asking questions about this agreeable. Okay. With that, I'll turn it over to Doug.
Sounds good. Thanks, Shane. So as Shane reiterated, really the purpose of this meeting is to present a little more detail about some constructability or some phasing options. That was really, they were talked about even 3 years ago, as this project was kind of starting to be concepted in the very preliminary before design started. But we want to gather that data and kind of relook at some of that. So that's really one purpose of items we're going to present here. And then also, ultimately, we want to build a consensus with the community, with the business owners, with the council, to come up with a solution that works for everyone, but still gets the project done as well. So just a very quick overview of the project. Most of you probably are familiar with it, but I thought it was worth explaining the limits here. So the project will start here at the south end in Arnolds Park and extend north of really Brooks Golf Course a little ways. And that's the extent of the project that was built back in the mid to late 90s, I think, when it was constructed the first time. So some commitments that have been previously made, and I apologize for blocking this for some of you sitting on this side, so I'll do the best here. But, some commitments that the DOT has made. First of all, there will be no construction done between Memorial Day and Labor Day. Obviously, that is one of the busiest times, not the only busy time, but the busiest time from a tourist perspective in the area. We've also committed to restoring the traffic over the winter months. There is a commitment to detour the through traffic on US 71 around to Highway 86. We're committed to obviously provide local access, local property access throughout the project, but it may not necessarily be front in your main driveway. And then ultimately, we need to minimize traffic delay because we still need to move traffic in the area. So I mentioned the detour. This graphically shows the detour for through traffic going around the southwest and north side of the West Lake here. As we lay out phasing of a project, whether it's this project or really any large transportation project, there's many items that come in that are considered. First is property access. How are we going to keep keep clients coming and keep your customers coming into your businesses? Second, we look at right-of-way impact. Really, we're limited on right-of-way, so we try to stay within the right-of-way where possible, but there are times where we need to get easements. And we look at the delay of traffic. What does it do to all the commuters, all the visitors in the area? We can't forget about the contractor. He needs room to work and be able to access the area. How long does the project take? There's a project may take a year, it may take 4 years, depending on how you phase a project. Utilities, not just the above ground utilities, but the below ground utilities, and what impact does a project have on those? And then ultimately cost. We're not going to talk a lot about cost tonight, but it is a consideration when looking at construction phasing. So as Shane mentioned, we've kind of reopened 4 options. One of the options is what's currently proposed. That'll be option 4, which we'll talk about at the end. But we've really opened up 4 options to discuss here and present this evening. Option 1 will be maintaining 2 lanes of traffic north-south with using some temporary paving, basically widening the road temporarily to allow 1 lane of traffic on that temporary pavement. Option 2 would be splitting it up into chunks, south to north, north to south. None of those details are worked out yet, but ultimately splitting it into shorter sections that you will construct 1 lane at a time and using the temporary signal. And we'll talk about those here shortly. Option 3 would be looking at what sections of the road could we potentially close fully to traffic. There's pros and cons of that, and we'll get to some of those ideas here shortly. Then option 4 is what I said, kind of the current option of southbound traffic, one lane, one direction, and then detouring some of the northbound traffic around to other locations. So jumping into phasing option number 1. So this is just a snapshot of the intersection of Sanborn Avenue. On this drawing here, you've got this pink or big color here. That kind of symbolizes where that temporary pavement would go, outside of the existing east curb line. And the green would be where the southbound traffic would be. Pink would be northbound traffic. So looking at that scenario in cross-section view, so looking at the roadway, on the east side here would be the existing southbound, or it'd be southbound traffic, basically in the northbound lane. And then we would put about 11 feet of temporary paving beyond the curb. That would be kind of the stage 1. At that time, we'd be building the southbound lane and the center lane of the area. Over the winter months, we'd restore it to get two-way traffic on its correct lane. And then the next construction season or seasons, we would then build what would be the northbound lane. So in cross-section, that would be an approach to that. In order to add temporary paving on that east side, there are a lot of conflicts. I just want to walk through some of the challenges with adding temporary paving outside the curb. There's several utilities in the way. There's several retaining walls. The larger transmission utility poles are not easily moved. And I don't know a dollar amount, but it's a big dollar amount to move those. And all of the inlets on that east side would have to be converted to grade inlets, which means, so the temporary paving would be kind of in here. This is the east side of the road. We would invert it, and water would run down the middle of the road during this scenario. So there would be, during rainfall events, you're going to be driving on each side of the drainage road. By adding temporary pavement on the east side here, some locations along the project are going to be very difficult to access, whether it's garages, driveways, or parking lots. And then there's a few other locations where there are some areas that it may not be possible to put temporary pavement there. So those are some of the concepts that we've, or some of the conflicts we've identified just as we prepared for this evening. For each of the options, I've developed a pros and cons list. This is not an exhaustive list, but this is just my quick approach looking at it from a pro and con perspective. Some of the pros is it obviously allows direct access from the south, whether that's Milford, Arnolds Park, or so forth. But those cars can easily go north into Okoboji. You're not trying to redirect vehicles necessarily around to get to Okoboji with this option number 1. But there are several cons as well. Some of them relate to safety, some of them relate to cost, some of them relate to traffic congestion. By having head-to-head traffic without the ability to turn left or get into your own left turn lane, and you know the amount of traffic that's out here, that's going to really back up traffic whenever you get a left turner wanting to go. So that's one of the challenges with this option number 1. With that delay comes some increased delay to emergency access, emergency vehicle access. The lane widths for this temporary pavement, because we are limited by some of these poles, they're going to end up being very narrow lanes. And some of the wider vehicles that use the highway will be a challenge in this scenario. It will extend the time frame for the overall project. I talked about drainage. It's going to be difficult to protect the inlets and protect sediment from going into the lakes by having the water down the middle of the road. And then there will be some cost increases no doubt. Moving on to phasing option 2. So this is the option where We would break it up into segments, north to south or south to north, and utilize this is just a picture of oftentimes you'll see this approach on some rural roads, bridge replacements, where you reduce it down to one lane, use a signal, so it's basically one lane crossing a bridge. We can utilize a similar approach to this project and break it up into short sections as we progress through Okoboji. For instance, the red area, maybe this would be phase 1 of the project. At the south end of Okoboji, kind of through the Lakeshore Drive intersection. Maybe that's the first piece that gets built with this, under this option number 2. The yellow lines indicate kind of that backdoor access to get to the property along the area. So once again, you would still have northbound, southbound traffic, only northbound goes, southbound has to wait, which is going to add some delays. As we progress north, this area in the green would be potentially phase 2 or stage 2 of this scenario. So really just picking up chunks as you progress north. In that scenario, there's a lot of driveways out here, and whenever there would be a driveway within that construction zone, that driveway would have to be closed because it's one lane traffic going one direction or the other, and the driver doesn't really know what direction traffic's going. So we would propose to close those driveways within that construction zone. Progressing north, we get north of Depot. By that time, then Depot's open, Lakeshore's open, but there's still that delay going north-south under this one lane traffic signal operation. Continuing north through Sanborn, once again, one more phase. And then the last phase to the north end of the project would be shown here graphically in yellow. This doesn't necessarily mean the project stops here. At this point, the existing road starts getting wide enough where we think we can go two-way traffic on 2 lanes and not have to have this type of a signal operation. So looking at it big picture for this phasing option number 2, these are the 5 potential scenarios of how we could break up the project to build it under the signalized operation. As with phasing option number 1, phasing option number 2 also has pros and cons. The pros listed here are the same, actually, as option number 1. The cons are a little bit different. We do still envision significant traffic delays with this, especially as it gets closer to Memorial Day or just after Labor Day when traffic's still up. A lot of visitors still in the area. So the traffic delay would definitely still increase and be significant. One other con of this scenario is having a temporary signal situation, but then backing up through other adjacent intersections. So for instance, at Sanborn, back up here. So when we're building this leg, traffic potentially could back up through Sanborn, northbound, or vice versa at Stakeout. And this scenario does significantly extend the time frame of the project as well. And I'll talk about that here shortly. So phasing option 3 was considering full closures of parts of the project. I call this kind of a hybrid approach because there's parts of this that you cannot close just because there's really no adjacent access in the area. So for instance, one is at Lakeshore South. What we would propose in this area would be a signalized operation again, one lane, one direction, but keeping 2-way traffic and using that temporary signal. And this would be maybe the first piece of this phasing option number 3. But as you get north, say between Lakeshore and Depot, this is an area that we think we could consider a full closure of those couple blocks in there. Based on, and we recognize this going through local roads, we've heard some of those concerns, but this is a way to build this piece as well as this piece and get in and out of there very quickly for the contractor. We give them as much room as possible to get in and out of there as quickly as possible, which really helps the schedule and the construction duration of a project like this. As you get north of Sanborn, that's where you start losing that potential for out or for access going around. So this is where, being more of a hybrid model, we'd go back to maybe a signalized operation, one lane, two directions, north of Sanborn up to kind of the north end of the project. So looking at this one big picture, we'd have these two center pieces that potentially could be full closures, not at the same time, but potentially full closures, and the adjacent locations, both south of Lakeshore as well as north of Sanborn, could be built under a signalized operation. Pros and cons, fairly similar still from a access perspective. You'd still have north-south access for traffic. Because parts of these would be full closures and we're doing it all at once, that means right in front of your business, there may only be one disruption versus building half at a time. So that could be considered a pro. The duration overall can be sped up a little bit by closing the road fully at times. I mentioned closing driveways within construction zones. Obviously that has to occur. This does push a few more cars to local streets because of the full closure scenario. And we still have concerns about stacking cars through adjacent signalized intersections. So I presented what I call two-way traffic options here, option 1 through 3. All three of those options, in order to maintain two-way traffic on the causeway, would be required, and you'd have to break up that causeway into 3 sections as well, really to avoid really long backups of traffic. So here's a graphical representation of what that could look like, kind of to reconstruct the causeway in order to keep two-way traffic going. But in order to do that, we're estimating even doing this work could add up to what we call 1 year of construction, recognizing that the peak construction season, we're not out there working. So it's at before Memorial Day or after Labor Day. But it could take 2 seasons to build something like that under a phased condition. And then whether it's option 1, 2, or 3, overall, we estimate that the overall project could extend from a 2-year construction time frame to up to a 4-year construction time frame because of how we would be chopping up, kind of doing the project in pieces, north to south versus more east to west. So then, yeah.
I'm sorry, can I ask one question just on that previous image?
You bet.
So this piece where it's the 3 different colored sections, about how long is that? And my question is, why couldn't you do that in one section?
Sure. So when I'm talking about, that's a good question. When we're talking about constructing under a 1-lane signal, so just not to get too many details here about how that works, but so say northbound traffic has a green light, southbound has to wait for the signal. So the longer that duration, or the longer length of that road, the longer it takes for that last car to clear through before southbound can get the green light. So this case, I want to say it was 400 feet. Do you remember? I mean, it's over.
These were about 700 each.
Yeah, so we're I'm pushing a half mile, a little over a quarter mile for sure. And to do that at one time, you're going to have traffic backed up. I mean, it's hard to estimate how far north, the traffic would be backed up to allow southbound traffic through while northbound is waiting, or vice versa.
Does it shorten the construction phase if you do that in one chunk?
I think it could shorten it,
Should be.
but the question would be, can the community, can traffic handle that? Or do people get so frustrated that then they're starting to go around anyway because they don't want to wait for 2 or 3 minutes to get across one of these sections of the road full causeway. So that's, yeah. I just have a few more slides here and then we'll definitely open it up to questions. So the phasing option 4 is what we currently were proposing or are proposing at this point. This is where we would come in the first fall. So currently it's still scheduled for the fall of 22. On the Okoboji side, we would build Lakeshore Drive first under that 1-lane traffic signal scenario and build portions of Sanborn as well in that initial fall of 2022 timeframe. So two-way traffic would still be going during that initial construction season. So then come when we actually start building the main part of the highway, we would at that point switch traffic to a two-way traffic direction from the north end to Sanborn. At Sanborn, that's where it would just be southbound. So southbound would continue going south, but there would be no northbound US 71 traffic at that time. Both across the causeway as well as up to Sanborn. So graphically, the blue kind of represents with customers, say at Mountain Marine or any of the businesses along here, to get back north, they would have to cross through Lakeshore, because that would have already been reconstructed, and kind of take that Lakeshore back to Sanborn to get back north. Pros and cons for this scenario as well. Overall, it's a shorter construction season or duration. We feel it's about a 2-year project versus potentially up to 4-year type duration. The other thing that this really does is it provides greater opportunities to turn left or to turn right, because you don't have that opposing traffic. So the traffic's not going to back up on the highway near like it would with some of the other phasing options presented. We feel it would also reduce construction cost, primarily because there's intersections being built at one time. There's cons, obviously. Some of the cons, you got that out-of-way travel for anyone coming from the south. It will also push more traffic onto some of the local road system in the area. So really, moving forward, I mean, with the questions we're about to receive and address, ultimately we're looking to build consensus for a phasing operation, a phasing scenario here. We feel all 4 of those have some opportunity. That phasing option 1 with the temporary paving is going to be a very challenging thing to do, just to be forward without really causing delay, but also just the presence of the large retaining walls on the west side. They're not back far enough to widen to the west. The large transmission poles on the east side. We need to keep this as safe as possible for the traveling public. And that option 1 is a very challenging proposal. But we want to at least talk through that so everyone can hear the pros and cons of that. And then if we can get to that consensus, then we would actually start working on the details, because these are really high-level concepts right now. So yeah, really want to hear what all of you have to say about your concerns, questions, and so forth. So with that, I think that's my last slide. So want to open up questions, or how do you want to do that?
I'm going to start with the council first to see if they've got any, and then we'll get the business owners. Council comments, anybody? question?
First, regardless of the option we take, what's it going to look like when it's done? Is it still going to look like it does now with one lane each direction with a center turning lane, or is there going to be an expanded two lane each direction?
Yeah, really the footprint of the road does not change. Really the curb lanes are changing, we're not changing. It's strictly a reconstruction of the existing pavement. There are a few enhancements that the city, both Arnolds Park and Okoboji, had committed to. And those are more aesthetic treatments behind the curb, adding some pavers, more decorative elements to the project. But the footprint doesn't change.
You just have to get rid of shear off the old cement that's crappy, excuse my pun. You don't have to redo any road bed or anything, so it's basically break it down and then repair it.
Yeah, I mean, there would be, you'd kind of restore the sub-base, but the profile's not changing. So yeah, there's obviously cleaning it up a little bit once the pavement's gone, kind of repairing the base that's there, and so you get back, that's correct.
You know, there's probably 100 ways that you could draw lines around this thing and break it up into chunks and do blocks and, you know, different things like that. I think, and I don't want to speak, I'm sure everyone in the room is going to have their chance. I'm not speaking for, I don't mean to speak for everybody in the room, but I think a lot of concern is really the bridge.
Sure.
And so I know, you know, we focused at these illustrations a lot on the Okoboji, kind of north of the bridge. Is there a reason why we couldn't focus a lot of effort on how to do the bridge, maintain two-way traffic on the bridge, and then maybe create some flexibility for routing and detours once we get into Okoboji and potentially Arnolds Park? I appreciate you talking about Arnolds Park or Okoboji here, but I know I see some Arnolds Park faces as well, and it would seem to me that logic would say, okay, go ahead and figure out the little detours within the cities when you're within the cities and there's that possibility. Focus on the elephant in the room, and that's the causeway. Yeah. If you can get two-way traffic through that causeway, there's probably a whole lot of flexibility for how we deal with the rest of this project. Yeah. Is there a reason why we can't look at it? Because it's almost like a hybrid of your hybrids.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, we actually grew up our own, you know, because I think somebody in the community said, well, it's fine to complain about it, but what's the solution?
What's the options, yeah.
And for us, it boiled, you know, first it was, oh my gosh, we can't have one-way traffic.
Right.
And then we're going, well, gee, we still have to try to figure out what's reasonable.
Sure.
And it really, for me at least, came down to the causeway. And I think when I've listened to people that call in and say, gee whiz, I'm concerned that, you know, a resident called, I'm from Milford, I had to go to the hospital twice so far this fall. I'm concerned that a 911 call, if I would have had to go all the way around 86, I probably wouldn't be making this call today. Those kinds of things. And so it isn't, I think there might be some solutions for some of this spinning around in Okoboji and Arnolds Park if we can just get that causeway piece done. Is there some possibility for you?
I mean, we showed on that one slide where there would be ways to phase the causeway. It's obviously going to cause delay to do that, but if that's something that the communities can handle and work with, I think it's something that we can entertain and come up and brainstorm some ideas to do that.
And are you saying to do that first, get that done?
Well, I mean, maybe. I don't, you know, it's for somebody, probably an engineer or whatever, to decide kind of what goes first, but that seems to me where the heartburn is. You know, that's what's scariest for people. That's what blows, you know, if you're in the construction business, if you're a landscaper, if you're an electrician, you're going from project to back to the shop. I mean, the working folks that are here in the 3 months preceding the summer and the 3 months after summer, they're real worried about not being able to go across that bridge.
So Julie, to address a little bit of your concern, when we talked about the stage one of the project, that was the intersections to be able to go across US 71. That was the original plan both in Okoboji and Arnolds Park for this fall, that we did the original schedule. It was to stage each of those intersections so you could go east-west across the critical intersections. So you talked about being down in Okoboji. What he's showing in blue here is our description here of where we were going through, doing one half of each intersection at a time, so you can have that back access through the community. So essentially by using Broadway, being able to cross at Broadway to get over to Iowa Street down to Linden, and then Ackley, that we keep a back connection there and an ability to get to the west side, the east side, and vice versa through the community. And also then be able to get back down to the south end of the project where we restore two-way traffic. So that's already part of our plan, that you have those packages as a local community through the Arnolds Park area.
Yeah, I don't think we have a problem with the intersection piece. That seems logical.
But that also gets back to your emergency services. If you were in that area, you are able to get to Linden at all times. You're able to get then on 190th, 250th to go north instead of going around on 86. I know, I think there was a comment of being 30, 35 minutes to get around. That's no place close with the travel time that's actually going to be.
In your phase one.
But all phases, phase 2 and 3, you're going to have access to be able to get. You'll be able to cross Broadway, go to Iowa, go to Linden, which turns 190th, 250th, and up and around.
Yeah, but you can't go north over the bridge.
No, but there's a way to go around to that location. You're talking about ambulance service with even existing today. Now we've added in that there's a staging, but I'll be honest with you, if you have multiple signals to go through, is that going to be any faster? Or is it going to be still easier to go around, just like what we described? Because one of the issues when you have one lane each direction is that traffic stops in front of you. They don't know where to go, don't have room to go. So you have to think about that too. It's not like the ambulance turns the signals on go, everybody gets out of their way. You do the two lanes at the same time even. You got a 10-foot wide lane. Where's somebody go when you're behind them? They have no place to get access off and get out of your way. So you have to think through that just saying, hey, two-way traffic's going to solve all of our problems. It's more complicated and more deeper than that. You have to think through those traffic flows. It's much to the comment too that he's talked about lefts. That if you have one lane each direction with that traffic flow, one person takes a left, and they stack 30, 40 cars behind them because they want to take a left. And somebody coming the other direction wants to take a left. Now you got both sides stacked up and nobody can move. So it's not as simple as saying, hey, we want one lane each direction. First, we want good traffic flow to go through there. It's a little bit how we landed on traffic in one direction. We did a similar approach. Admittedly, the detour wasn't like it is going around on 86 or going around the county roads to the east, but we could handle originally just short of 20,000 vehicles. Some of those chose to detour. We did Iowa 12 and downtown Sioux City. But we were able to provide access to businesses. They could get a business on the right side, they could get a business on the left side, they could come immediately out of those businesses, get into traffic flow and flow south. Also, when we do the two and split it in the east-west half, it's wider. You have more room, so if somebody needs to pull over to the side, that's not saying that the public won't freeze sometimes in a vehicle with flashing lights behind them. But there is room for them to pull over to the side and allow emergency vehicles to still go around them. So there are some pros to those options that we put out there in the one-way flow too, and to think about how that overall traffic flow goes. So I just want to put those thoughts out there as part of the decision, because it's not simple. There's not a very good predictive model completely. Hey, what's the ambulance time going to be? Well, it depends how many signals we have out there, what time we have out there, how long we put those phases, how many phasings we go at the same time. So as we dig into the details, we can compare with those response times to particular things. But I think it's shorter than what maybe was thought, considering that you can go around on the east side. I also think it's not the same efficiency going northbound as it is today.
I don't know that. I think for sure though that, there's going to be, and like I said, there's some flexibility definitely. And I think also staging it in a way to where there's not disruption in both Arnolds Park and Okoboji throughout the entire phase. I love the idea of saying, hey, you know what, let's bite off the intersections first. I think there's some logic there. Let's bite off Arnolds Park then and not disrupt Okoboji. Let's bite off Okoboji and not disrupt Arnolds Park. And then let's the causeway is the trouble. And so it's going to be unpleasant. And I think we're saying that there's always going to be that organic correction. To sit there and say, well, we shouldn't do it because it'll take, people will just start going on 86. That's going to happen no matter what happens. you're gonna have folks say, I like going around 86 better because I just feel better driving rather than sitting. I mean, people are gonna find their own way. It's just picking out the one that folks have the most contentment with, I think, when they think about access to their work, their residences, and emergency services. So.
We discussed, one of the things I know you brought up was, having it both spring and fall, where there's not much of a recovery period because it happens. It lengthens the project, but it is still sort of feasible that we say, hey, what's a better time? Should we just do our work maybe only in each fall? We'll stretch out the length of time of the project, but that's on the table as well. But hey, we get the spring and the summer to conduct normal business, maybe then we can just have the disruption for a fall, pick a little shorter period of time that's in there as a disruption to our community. The counter side of that is, hey, then we're going to have to live with this. This may now take 5 years instead of 2 years as we package what those disruptions are. But there are all kinds of staging options once we figure out how we want to attack the basic staging. Some of the stuff that we had in early conversations too about emergency response, more so with the cities of Arnolds Park, and there are people that need to get to the emergency services when they're called in, fire, ambulance, those kind of things, is to pre-stage some vehicles for them to go, ATVs in particular, and give them access both either across the Spine Trail Bridge or going across the causeway itself and have them room so they can get up to and respond if they are called in to work. So that was one of the early conversations we had as well. There was a little bit of conversation that the city of Arnolds Park was going to consider pre-staging some of the vehicles, maybe potentially on the south side of the bridge or not. I'll be honest with you, circle back with them on that one where they are in that conversation with the communities. But I do know that they were thinking about how they were going to access and get people to be able to respond. We specifically went the southbound direction for people's information because we wanted to get those vehicles as quick as they could to where they need to respond to on the south side of the bridge. So if they get to the emergency vehicles, we got to wait for them to quickly get there. They can hop on 71, they can go southbound, they can get where they need to get the help. It takes them a little bit longer to circle back around after the fire. That's not as critical as getting to them right away.
Which we'll have to do if we just make it too, obviously.
I have a question. A lot of lights that are set up now have sensors on them, so if there's an emergency vehicle, sirens come in, they switch. So that'll solve a lot of the problem that you're talking about. If somebody's coming up with an emergency vehicle and the light switch is on the other way, it'll slow it. I mean, they're gonna get thrown out quicker, they're gonna be able to get that one way faster. Now, I don't know if that's technology's available for the lights that you guys put up or not.
The short answer is yes. It's still not as immediate as an intersection because you still have to let everybody face through.
I understand.
You come to the other side. The other issue is if you're in a single lane, the ambulance may need to take the vehicle back. The people in front of them, they're going to have to wait, make sure, go, follow, how do they get out of the way. It's not quite as simple as just a straight intersection. But you're right, you can do that, but it's just a consideration that it's still going to take a little longer than a normal intersection.
Okay, that was a concern because we've got a lot of EMS people, including myself here. And that, I mean, going to the east side still adds 20 minutes if you go fast. So there's a big difference there. And they'll talk later, I'm sure, and have questions. So that, and you can kind of feel it by the room, that flow, and I understand your points. It's also shorter distance, faster going. So that's all.
Jerry, Walter, either one of you have questions, clarification? Okay, yes, Butch, hi.
Hi. I have a question and wondering if you had planned an option 5 of doing nothing at Utica County. I have not heard one complaint about why don't you guys fix your rough roads or anything like that. We have really great roads. So I would suggest that you consider an option 5 and not doing anything until maybe 10 years from now when the community's begging you to come here. You have to spend the money, send it to Dickinson County, we'll use it for property tax relief. We would all be happy if we do nothing. Our roads are fine.
Yes.
I must have missed, what is the driving force in this as to why you're doing this, sir? And I'm not trying to be adversarial.
It's the pavement condition. If you've been watching the pavement out there, we've been patching that for 12 years already. To drive a little bit further back into this, when it was paved 20 years ago, and our specifications have changed since then, so what happened there, I think, will occur. One of the projects that the air content that we have in the pavement out there is lower than what we want to have. It essentially makes it freeze-thaw susceptible. And that's what you're seeing out there, is after each winter, the moisture's getting into it, it's cracking, it's falling apart, it's falling because it can't resist those freeze-thaw properties. And it's throughout the pavement. It's not just in one portion of it. At the time we did this project, we did sampling and testing only in front of a paver to see what the air content was. We have some specifications that we sample after the paver to make sure. This project is one of the reasons why we've had that change in specifications that occurred at that time. But we're supposed to get 40 years out of the pavement. We started Dura patching after it was 8 years old. We're patching 2 out of every 2 years out there right now and disrupting the community every fall. It's only going to get worse. We're patching next to patches already. The concrete that's next to our patch or underneath our patch, sometimes we get the partial depth patches, is falling out as well. It's just going to be a cycle of getting worse to continue to patch out there on the roadway. I wish I had a better forecast for it, but that's the reality that we're facing.
Am I understanding correctly that if in the fall you go with the proposed 1 lane, would next summer then also continue to be the 1 lane all through summer?
No, summer we are open. We have no impact in the summer. So how the initial phasing was that we had developed 3 years ago, and up to this point in time, I'll be honest, we thought we were okay with the communities, was that this fall coming up, so a year from now, starting after Labor Day, we would work through the intersections to get the crossings, to go across those major crossings, make sure everybody has a way to get access back from the east and the west side. Then when we go ahead and we split that project into the 2 southbound paths, one of those would be in the spring then of 23, or spring of 23, and then we do fall of 23. We have a little cleanup work to do in 24, median sidewalks, erosion control, those types of things. But you're really talking it's 23 as our stage now, that's spring and fall. If it was critical that people said, hey, that's too much impact in 1 year, you can make those each a fall, those each a spring sequence. Tend to like fall sequences a little bit better. Tend to have a little bit more time in the fall versus a wet spring. You get really tight, really short, a little more risk. So if I had my choice between them, from a construction season standpoint, we prefer to do the falls. Yes, great. Comments on construction periods that you would like spring or falls if the industry had one?
Bigger windows are usually in the fall and you have a higher risk with the wet springs.
Do we also have in the contract itself penalties for being late or bonuses for getting it done quicker?
So what we'll do is a disincentive clause. So that's essentially what you're doing. There's a cost of what the detour costs for the public to go around the lake each day. The travel time that is, that's a basis of what we offer as an incentive disincentive. We'll also have intermediate completion dates with stages that there will be a penalty on. So if they would happen to go past Labor Day, and actually it'd have to be done the week before prior to Labor Day. So I should clarify that. For Memorial, sorry. In the spring, you're correct. There would be a penalty, so they get penalized pretty severely on that one too. So every day would cost them money. But yeah, you do want to offer them an incentive if they have less days that are out there that they're working. But that's to be based on something, and the cost to the public is what we base that on.
Okay.
Liquidated damages can backfire on you because in our last project here on the highway, there was a bonus offered for early completion and liquidated damages for late completion, which is why they forced it through with inferior product in poor weather. And being on a board where we do construction, we see that also. Asking someone to hurry up and shove it in to beat a timeline isn't necessarily forward is a good idea.
Shane, you want to kind of summarize that question a little bit louder?
Okay. So she's saying that sometimes you don't want to rush a contractor either. You don't want a contractor to feel the need to cut corners or do something that's inferior, and that with the premise that could have been part of what occurred on this last one. I'll defend the industry a little bit. I think there was another issue that was driving that one on that particular project. I don't think it was so much the rush. If you really want to go into details, at that point in time, there's a cement shortage. So what they called hot cement was coming out, listed very warm, coming from the kilns at that point in time. When you use former cement, it usually takes a little bit more water, higher curing temperature, which at that point in time, we did not have vibration specifications that limit the amount of vibration that went into a pavement. So what they did is they had their vibrators running at a higher rate. Not trying to do something inferior, but just be able to lay the concrete down with the conditions and materials that they had. What that ended up doing was knocking out that air content because of the higher vibration that they were using. It's an unfortunate consequence. It was something that was unintentional. Nobody was trying to do it, but we found that out after the fact.
Now you're all construction contractor experts.
Well, when this first started happening, after it was 8 years old, we were attaching, we took cores out there, we took construction records, we were going through the history files that we had and the materials that were delivered, the type of materials, the qualities, our quality assurance tests, our freeze-thaw specimens that we took. We started going back through all that information. So there was a pretty good investigation that went on to what happened.
Dan, were you next after Kay? Did you raise your hand?
Well, I just was going to ask that when you do phases with one-way signals, once you've done 2 lanes, then you would be able to open up 2 lanes and not have a signal in that section. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think there's an option to do that. That initial phase is definitely, it's got to be a signal flag.
Right.
There may be ways on that next phase, when you do the other side, that at that point maybe you can go head-to-head on those 2 existing lanes. You still need to allow enough room for the contractor to work, to obviously build the third one. But under the current phasing, they're going to build about half of the road at a time. So that provides that extra width for vehicles. Whereas if you're doing it one of these alternate scenarios, it'd get really narrow from that gap perspective between traffic and construction. But I think something we would definitely look at if one of those options appear to gain some momentum or consensus.
Jim?
Why was blacktop good enough for 86, but not 71?
2 things that were going on. One is the type of deterioration that we have going on. If you cover it up with HMA, you're still going to have moisture that gets underneath it, and that's still going to have freeze-thaw damage, especially at the joints where it reflects through and it cracks. And we're not going to get the life out of the HMA overlay. So without getting that life,
You don't need to, because it's going to cost probably 1/10 of what your project's going to cost.
But we're just going to be in a perpetual cycle. We'll be back patching before too long. We'll be back out to replace the overlay.
All this stuff, you do all this stuff, we won't need the road because there won't be any businesses left.
Besides the one of just trying to address it, so we have to hopefully get in, get out, and that wasn't our intent.
4 years?
Well, I want a major impact of just on 23 of 1 year, be in, be out, and be gone. That was really what the DOT's strategy was with going southbound in 23 to get the primary paving done, because we were concerned about that length of impact, to your point. The other one with the HMA and the overlays there is drainage, to be honest with you. Filling in the curb and gutter units with an asphalt overlay. That's what's different on 86. You have a rural cross section, you shed water, it goes to the outside. Whenever we do an HMA overlay in an urban area, you fill in the curb and gutter, you block drainage, you have a chance that you change the drainage pattern slightly, create ponding along the curb and gutter units. So that's something we're always concerned. We like to use an HMA overlay in an urban area. It's pretty much a last resort because of those impacts on the drainage.
And a little bit more on that point, we already have areas along 71 that drainage is a concern, and ponds water, especially down by Oak Hill area. We just recently did, well, probably 4 years ago, did some work there that improved it and haven't had as big a problem since then. But if we were to fill in part of that gutter, the water would be overflowing the curbs for a large part of this roadway.
There was a gentleman in a burgundy shirt. Yes.
So have you considered continuing to patch for 5 or 10 more years? I mean, what's that versus doing all this work right now? I mean, the cost, I mean, it's very obstructive to do a project like this versus patching. I don't think it's near as,
Can you patch? The short answer is yes, you always can patch. It's the cost and disruption, because it's going to be annual. It's going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars annually. And it's going to be a close-ended site.
versus the project, which is going to be millions?
Correct, but when we get there, it's also the disruption. Here we're talking about disruption, maybe a spring and a fall. If we did the original, maybe it's 3 or 4 falls. We're willing to live with us being out there a couple of months every single year, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars with no end in sight. That's the option to keep patching. You know, you say that you don't want to be disrupted, some of you more than you need to, but that's the reality. And the patching is only going to continue to get bigger and bigger and take longer to do.
I know, you're bringing a project to the community that a lot of us aren't really seeing a whole lot of value.
And I appreciate that. I think to go back into history a little bit too, we asked the communities when we started this. This was a conversation that was when the project originally got, before it was programmed, when the commission came up here to visit about 5 years ago, of the need that was there, wanting to get something done to address the road in the deteriorating states. So it was something that was a response in a conversation with the communities 5 years ago. It wasn't just so hardly saying, hey, we live DOT, we're going to go do this project. It was a need that was brought up about the condition of the roadway. Is there something that could be done about it? Recognizing that it was only going to get worse.
So I think the biggest problem is the bridge, you know, having two-way traffic. Is it something that you could, you know, asphalt that and make that last longer so you can always have two-way traffic? You know, sure, you maybe have to repave it every 8 years or something, but at least they could do that in the middle of the night or something. You know, I mean, just 2 lanes and get half of it done and
the answer with most things is always, could you do it?
I know.
Yes.
Yeah.
But is that the investment that's there? If we're disrupting other parts of the community, get something that's going to last and get out, do want to leave something that's still going to have to be addressed some other point again in the future. I just don't have a lot of faith that overlaying the condition of the concrete there with an HMA overlay, you're going to get life. Normally when we do an HMA overlay, we're looking at a 20-year life. I'm thinking we're going to be lucky if we can have that risk payment underneath it, maybe even only like 5 to 7 years before you have to start doing major work. So you put yourself in that cycle of perpetually having to do something because of the type of deterioration that we have this particular pavement. Wish it wasn't the case. I was part of the project 20 years ago. I thought it'd be the only time I was doing anything significant in my career up here. So I do feel a little guilty that I'm back up here far shorter than what that is. It's not what anybody can.
But can you answer a question?
Excuse me, sir. Yeah, Mike Hefner in the back, he's been trying.
So the contractor is going to lay the mud down. I assume from this conversation that he's got equipment to do all 3 lanes with one run.
He will be splitting it in half. That will do
So
half the pavement.
he'll do a lane and a half, and then come back and do the other lane and a half.
Correct.
So why doesn't he just tear out a lane and a half, hire some flaggers, and keep the road open?
Because you're talking something that takes weeks, over a couple of months. They're going to try to have a flagger, just not at the main roadway, but also every driveway, every access that's through there.
It worked on 86, you guys tore half of that out, did half at a time with flaggers.
Or are you talking, the efficiency of trying to get in, get out is to do it in a larger chunk. It doesn't take substantially longer to do a longer stretch in one time. The shorter, if you said, hey, let's do this, when you say flaggers, you're talking doing it like 200-foot chunks.
No, I'm saying start at Sandburn, go to the bridge on one lane, pave it, turn around, take the other lane out, keep one lane open the whole time. That way the cops and the fire department, and anybody that gets sick as a way to get to the hospital.
So again, are you thinking that you need flaggers 24/7?
Well, you got those stoplight things at night when there's no traffic.
But you're still trying to get people in and through from the side roads, from driveways.
Well, you said that you already were gonna do the intersections ahead of time.
Correct.
So you got the intersections. I'm talking about doing it between the intersections.
But if you're gonna have an emergency vehicle coming through, you wanna stop from accessing, I guess, Todd,
I think you're saying something more like we showed on option 2, where we were using signals, but instead of signals during the daytime, use flares.
Yeah, I mean,
So
and
it's
you're worried about
split up.
backing the traffic up. I drove on 86 all last summer, and there was a mile of traffic in between. Everybody got by just fine, but you could go north and south.
the signals are what's trying to serve that same purpose without having a person out there. I mean, that's really what we're doing there. It's the safety of the person that's out there, especially if you thought you're gonna have them 24/7. That's a difficult task to do, to manage, to not make mistakes.
Well, I get you can't have people there all night, but at night, there's hardly any traffic.
But you're still gonna have to manage the traffic. Because there's hardly, someone's gonna have to tell them to go each direction each
That's what
time.
those signal lights are for at night.
I think you also have the driveways that have driveways within a one-lane signal. I mean, sure, traffic's way down at night, but there's still potentially people coming in and out of driveways, and they still don't know what direction to be going under a signal operation when it's just one lane at a time. So that's part of the safety component that we need to be looking at.
Well, I think the safety component and a lot of the people in this room are concerned about is you're gonna send all the traffic south. And if there's a problem on the other side of the bridge, they've gotta go all the way around the lake. Now, if it's anybody that I know is having a heart attack in Arnolds Park, I will guarantee you they wanna get to the hospital as fast as they can and not take a 15-minute tour in the ambulance.
And that's if it's not snowing.
And that's if it's not snowing. I understand, you guys got a horrible job. I get that, okay? And I feel bad for you. But I also know somebody further up the food chain sent you here to do this, okay? There's got to be a way to keep at least one lane of traffic going north and south, even if people gotta sit somewhere for 10 or 15 minutes. Because if you've got the lights that have the emergency things on them, and you need the ambulance, or you need the cops, or you need the fire department, those things will lock up and let them through. On to the next question. I'll let it go.
Okay, who else? Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, sir.
I just wanted a simple yes or no question. Like to Butch's question about, is there an option of not doing anything? Yes or no, or is this going to happen no matter what?
So I don't think I think Ketch's question is being yes or no. Can this not happen?
That's the question.
But the answer is, ultimately, we want to work with what the city does. With the elected officials, we have to have an agreement to do this, to shut down the side roads. So yes, it takes community consensus. The final vote of that is, whether they like it or not, it is the city council, because they're the ones that we come with agreement. They take your input, they feel what they have the community as a consensus. They said, look, DOT, we don't want to do it, or look, we want to pull back and just do like the signalized intersections, the improvements that are there, and figure out the phasing later on. That is options. Prior to the meeting, I mentioned both Mary and Julie's conversations up here, that those are options. If it needs to step back and deal with the part in Arnolds Park and make that a separate phase, a separate project, that can be done. It's not that it has to be solved here tonight, but it'd be nice to get a consensus building, share information in the community. We're not saying that, hey, tonight we need the decision, darn it. We can't have the consensus, we're going with what we came up with here, but that's not the case. It is really to get input and ideas. It is really to decide what is the way going forward from here. Is it going with what we have? If there's only minor change so we can make something work, we can do that with what we're doing in Arnolds Park. The decision is, hey, look, we want to step back as a community. We want to take another look at this. So maybe it's okay to do the intersections, maybe it's not, and just leave it at that. Maybe it's like, we're not even going to play at the intersections right now. Well, this is our part of the community, want to have a separate project. Can we delay that and continue our conversation here? That is an option. So it wasn't your yes, no answer that you want.
Yeah,
but
so basically that's a no.
But basically, I'm just saying that
I mean,
there's
you can
options.
say no, it's okay.
Yeah, it's no.
Okay,
But I just want
there
to
you go.
explain that there
That's
are
the answer.
options, and that
Thank
we've
you.
expressed those to the community that there is options.
John, I think you have the next question.
So I have nitpicky question and maybe a follow-up afterwards, but I think it was option 3 where you were closing down 2 sections of Okoboji. I would assume you have the same option in Arnolds Park, but how long does each of those 2 sections take? What's the total closure? Approximately.
So, to answer your question, we don't know. We haven't calculated it. I mean, there's been, what the approach we would likely take with this would be, we'd build as much of the pavement as possible to get two-way traffic restored as quickly as possible. But then there's probably still gonna be lane closures on one side or the other to finish up. Maybe it's a curb, maybe it's a sidewalk, anything outside the curb would be followed. So it's 3 weeks?
So,
4
yeah.
weeks?
4 each section.
So I'll give out maybe a little bit similar answer, but a little bit different, just in conversation I had with Greg. If you did a full closure, those 2 pieces that are full closure, the construction time to rip out and repave those is about 2 weeks. Now, the sun doesn't shine every day, so you have to take that into consideration. And there's a little bit of prep work afterwards, and a little bit of striping and things afterwards. So yeah, you're probably talking about a 2 to 3 week closure, depending on how good weather treats you. If we put incentive, disincentive, and motivate a contractor to do that relatively quickly on those full closures. Where you do the half at a time, you essentially double that. From the standpoint, it takes pretty much the same total operations that you have. Of prep work, of tearing out, of paving, of curing the concrete, of sawing the concrete, sealing the concrete, and getting it back real for traffic. So each of those sections that you have in the both sides, you're now talking something more like 6 weeks to do each of those. So you have 5 sections. Depending on the section you're talking about there, you're either 3 weeks or 6 weeks. So if you want to do in one season, those shorter sections, if you do that, the ones that are the 6 weeks, you're only going to accomplish one of those in a season. So you're still probably looking at 4 seasons, spring or falls, to complete the work that's up there. If you're willing to do 2 of those sections of signals at the same time, and we work through the signal details to make sure the backups don't go into those sections, then you might be able to shorten that into 3 construction seasons. I'm going to look at Greg to see if, from an industry perspective, am I wrong in what I said?
No, I think you're right on, Shane. And yeah, so Shane, you're right on. And I think the short closures, that was something I proposed to them as they discussed with us. It's safer for the workers. You only have 2.5 feet between line traffic and the construction that's happening there. So if you were going to get there, you have to remember that construction vehicle and construction traffic are coming in and out of that. When you're 1 lane or with 2 lanes on the other side and you don't have the full closure, trucks are backing in from the other end to back up to a paver. They're backing in. There's a lot of interaction with the live traffic and as you're trying to do this. If you can close it, you can pave the whole thing, be done in a little bit, and then work on your outside on your intakes and get your 2-lane traffic through the middle. 2 weeks. Yeah, so it's not only safer, it's quicker.
So my follow-on then is, because we all want less disruption, and so this sounds like it's the least disruptive, but do all the businesses have access? Do all the businesses have the ability to have at least foot traffic to them, and then half the time?
So half at a time or the whole?
Half the time of versus doing the 1 lane?
Cutting the time down that I have.
Yeah, so with the full closure that I proposed, I would add the intersection improvement at, what's the one, Depot also, so that you can always get across Depot during these closures, so that you can get to the driveways and the condos and the residents on the other side of the road, so you can get there. So you're always having that ability to get there during that south closure period, and you can either get through Gordon Drive to get around Mile and those things. When you flip to the north, same thing, you can get to the back sides of those businesses on the west side of the road, and you can get in from crossing at Depot and up those driveways to access all those things. So you would be able to access everything.
And I would assume that you have the same scenario in Arnolds Park if that's something that they would like to take a look at. Thank you.
Would that strategy extend to the causeway? I mean, if that was a strategy that you could employ in the causeway, how quick could you get the causeway done?
To just close the causeway and pave?
Yep.
Pretty quick.
Very quick.
Like how quick?
Come on, man.
I haven't run
Because I think that's the ticket.
Honestly, we want to talk about emergency vehicle access in those, especially during the causeway, because then you're totally cut off, as you probably said earlier.
Well,
But we'd have much more discussions about that with the community.
Yeah, there'd have to be a lot of staging.
Yeah, and I mean, you know,
Right.
Police and
Yeah.
fire department for that. Yes, Dan?
You had said something about splitting the projects, Arnolds Park and Okoboji. What you're proposing here, if there's a solution for one city, does that same solution happen in the other city?
Each community controls their own decision of what they would like to do.
Okay, so you guys are open to discussing in the different cities on how to handle them.
Yes.
But I think Julie is right, is the causeway is the kicker here. And how do we keep that open for emergency vehicles? Because even if if you're gonna close, if you're only gonna have one direction, I think it ought to be going north. So you can always go to the hospital. Each city has their own police and fire. It's the ambulances and the healthcare that we're having trouble with. And when you propose everything going south, then that means that heart attacks, trauma patients, everything goes on 86 or goes around Camp Foster. And I would rather see, if that's the only solution, is think about everything going north, and then the south people, the people that head south, are gonna have to figure out alternatives. But that's just me.
And we're obviously not medics, but we had some of the discussions about a year and a half ago with the communities, a smaller group, and we talked about the northbound and southbound, and it was our impression that the quicker you get to the incident with a medic, with the advanced life support, is more critical than getting necessarily to the hospital quicker. But I'm not a medic, I'd love to hear more about that.
Chris?
I think with the first responder in the communities that we have to the south end, Milford's unaffected at this point, then they would be able to cover the majority of their calls with their first responders. As far as us, I think either keeping traffic open on the signal through the causeway on the bridge is an option, or if you do one direction, I think north would be the better as well for transport to the hospital. I'd agree with Dan on that assessment to get patients to the hospital, because we do have first responders. It opened up my first response from Arnolds Park, because that's where the rescue vehicle is parked. Not your guys' fault, but I didn't get a call, so we didn't have that discussion. But basically, you'd be shutting down half of my response for fire or emergency services by going southbound only. I wouldn't be able to get to my fireboat with the majority of my folks without finding an alternative route, which, I mean, we can figure it out if we have to. That's what we do. But it would be preferred that we'd be able to access it through a main road. And then the majority of my volunteers come from the south to respond to the north if I have something in Okoboji. Again, we'd figure it out. We have mutual aid partners, but the preferred would probably be in a northerly direction, or the signal through the causeway and have the periphery roads to be able to access our emergencies in both cities.
Appreciate that. Just a little history of how we got to southbound is early in the concept. We had all the same players involved, but we did ask the communities what they thought was the preference to it.
Sure.
And that was the response that we got at that time. Now that has been years since that question was first raised that we got this.
Sure.
It wasn't made blindly is all I'm trying to say, but I do appreciate that. I think it's a good conversation to continue having.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that thought.
Okay, Mr. Slater, I believe you have a question?
I'm just curious on what community members you're talking to, because that guy runs the Arnolds Park Fire Rescue of Arnolds Park and Okoboji. Who are you talking to?
We were talking to representatives that work from the city of Arnolds Park were at that meeting, from city managers, representatives of this.
So we have people up here that were at those meetings? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yeah. When we did the concept, we invited both communities to it. We've had a couple meetings since then about that phasing. I'm not going to say that everyone that's there is still there today, because there's been some change in the staff and the council members that were on board at that point in time, but that was the initial direction that we got as we posed the question.
But doesn't everybody in this room think they should have probably reached out to the people that run the fire rescue ambulance services, not just council members? Does everybody in this room, including the council, agree to that?
I think it's really valuable now, right? And so when he says he wants two-way over that bridge,
He should get it.
boy, that's important.
You know,
That's important.
one thing I hadn't heard about, you know, if you want a con on option 4, I haven't heard anything about our schools, Okoboji, Milford. And so we have our children have to come across the bridge to get home. The small children in buses, and children like my 15-year-old who be driving after football, he's tired, or after basketball, starting to get a little icy, and he's going to be forced to go around on 86, which is a very, I think most people agree, Highway 86 is a dangerous highway. And I don't want these kids driving across. That's one of the reasons I'm totally against option 4. And has anybody ever thought about our kids? We can talk about costs or anything else. What's the life of one child?
We lay out a lot of factors that are in there. It's where we're at. I mean, we do. We're trying to balance a lot of needs that are here.
Well, it certainly needs to be considered. I haven't heard anything about that.
People having to do detour and take a detour into consideration. Yeah, the distance was a consideration there, and it's still a consideration as we go forward.
A couple of years ago, down East Okoboji by Tweeters, a couple snowmobilers had gone through the ice. Had gone and broke through the ice and were surviving for a very, very long time. And the airboat came from Arnolds Park up north, and the boat ramp had come and go and got there and rescued those people and I know the people, and they said, we'd already given up. We didn't have 15, 20 seconds left. So it was critical that rescue stuff from Arnolds Park could get north. There's been no other way possible. There was no other way in order to save those two boys. So the north to south, or south to north is critical for rescue.
I guess just to respond to that point, and I agree with you 100%, but my understanding is this, basically you have a 2-month fall window and about a month and a half spring window, and you would have two-way traffic when it is icy, over the winter.
This was about this time of the year.
Yeah, and we're done working for the year right now, because it's way too cold. We'd be out of that construction phase.
Okay, the next person I believe wants to talk is Steve Anderson.
I'm Steve Anderson with the Sanitary District. This idea of going south only is not going to work for us. I can't stage equipment north there, 1,000 feet north of that bridge. I got the biggest lift station in the area. It has the average a day is 1 million gallons pumped through that thing. All my equipment is south. I don't have equipment I can stage up there. I can't stage a back. I can't stage a whole slew of fuses and everything else at that lift station. That lift station goes down, I've got 30 minutes to respond. So if we have to go there because if there's a fuse out or whatever, we have to evaluate it, and we have to get back to the plant to grab the equipment and then bring it back. There's going to be basements filled with wastewater. It's just the reality of it. We're going to have wastewater going into the lake. So if my trucks have to go all the way up to Spirit Lake, come back and around, we're in trouble. And that's the biggest lift station. It's not the only lift station I've got. And when you talk about the communities, there's more than just 2 cities that work in this area. I mean, there's the Sheriff's Department, the EMS, and all that stuff. We're part of this community. The wastewater, my department is responsible for all the wastewater that's in the Iowa Great Lakes. Not once have I been talked to about, hey, can you get here, can you go there? But you're gonna detour all this traffic right next to my lift station. And you know, most of the people in the DOT that have been working on this project know we've got a 24-inch force main underneath that highway. So you know that's coming from somewhere. So I kind of go back with Chris, is if it's not two ways, we're taking a public health threat, we're taking a water quality threat, and I don't want to be responsible for that. So it's just something that we need to talk about, but I mean, the city of Arnolds Park has told me that these meetings have been going on, but nobody reaches out beyond the two cities because it's just two cities. But this community, no matter what you want to call us, I mean, we all have our jurisdictions, but it's all intertwined, just like it would be up in, you know, in Des Moines or whatever. So I think we need to have a bigger conversation with the municipalities, all the other governmental entities that are involved with this, because it just seems like we've isolated it when we all need to be at the table. So
I appreciate that. That brings up a point that I'd like to make. And I'll take this hit for the DOT team. A lot of this project development happened at an abnormal time for COVID. Normally we have a public information meetings where we invite the public to come gather, do things similar to this. A lot of information that we had went out in different methods. It was mailings, it was emails, it was an invite to electronic meetings that weren't probably nearly as effective as gathering like this. So that's an unfortunate aspect of one of the things that we as the DOT have learned through the COVID event, that there is no substitute for gathering people together. And I will just admit when we talk about that is one of the things that was normally at a critical time of gathering that information that we were going through and learning about. So I'll take that hit that the DOT, in hindsight, as we looked at this project and others, have found that there is no replacement for getting people together and having this conversation. That's part of the reason we're willing to be here and really look at this.
Thank you.
You just mentioned a really good point though, right? COVID has been devastating to the lakes area. And now we're gonna take this step on top of COVID. You're asking a lot of these folks that have their livelihoods here. It's a tough challenge. All of a sudden they're coming off of this COVID that's crazy, we don't even know where we are. And now all of a sudden we're gonna shut this down and run one road. You're asking a lot. The timing couldn't be worse.
I can appreciate that very much. I do.
Wayne, did you have something you wanted to?
Yeah, I had a question about the causeway, and if you would shut that down and do that all in one shot with no public traffic, could we leave that open for emergency vehicles somehow that they could cross during that time frame? And then the next question is, if you get that open, would it make sense to have northbound traffic and then route the southbound traffic on Sanborn over to Lakeshore Drive to keep it off of the road? Would that make the project go quicker and not send people all the way around to 86?
So instead of detouring highway traffic on 86, actually detouring highway traffic on the local system.
Right.
Well, let's not address two things there. One is, let's go back to the first question about the emergency vehicle through the causeway. I'll use the term very challenging, I think, to do that. There are some parts of that where it's more readily available to do that, but as you are in that stage of actually paving it and have the wet mud and the end of your concrete and the width that we're talking about, the heat up to that top, there's part of that where it wouldn't be feasible, just to be honest with you. Through some of it, potentially, but it would take some work.
What's the length of that concrete?
About 2,000 feet.
So, I mean, 2 lanes of that paving is 1 day's worth of paving. If you were to pave 2 lanes, you could use haul trucks in the 3rd lane there, and obviously if the haul trucks can get through and get the concrete there, the plastic concrete there, you can get emergency vehicles through there. In an emergency, people will get the heck out of your way and allow that to happen, okay? There will be a period of time of about 2 days where the concrete needs to cure out and get hard. Then there'll be a lot more access. So, can you? Most of the time you could get somebody through an emergency. Same thing if there was, you know, in those closure periods that were proposed in the stuff north of there, There'll be times, because there'll be construction equipment running back and forth. There could be other equipment getting through those closure periods during that time. There are gonna be about 2 days where you don't wanna drive on that concrete. But other than that, it'll be challenging and sporadic. But if emergency vehicle comes, they're getting through.
Jeremy, I believe you have a
Well,
question.
yeah, I still have the question. I can answer if I could.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Just trying to make sure I answer questions that don't want to be accused of not answering a question again. So as far as traffic going on the city streets, we try to minimize that. We don't want to overwhelm a city street that is really designed for the traffic. Like many things, can you consider to do that? Yes. I would still say though, you always want an official detour on 86 to take that traffic out of the community that doesn't have the intent of stopping it. Otherwise, you're just going to overwhelm the system. For short periods, trying to put the remainder of the traffic in city streets, we consider that, but we try to do that only when we need to. The conversation we can have with communities, yes. In one of the stages, we already have that, where we are taking traffic for a period of time on one of the city streets in Arnolds Park. But, you know, you can say the same thing, hey, well, you can take traffic, you know, through the local streets here in Arnolds Park. But you have to be cautious of how much you want to do that. You say, because you're looking at Lakeshore Drive, it's not designed to handle 5,000, 10,000 vehicles a day. So you have to be conscientious of the environment that you're putting that traffic in. Are we open to those conversations with the communities are? Yes.
Thank you.
Darren?
Well, I know we're just getting back to, you know, people with regular habits, and disturbing those habits and making them go around to 86 is going to hurt a lot of those, you know, businesses that I'm not going to go northbound and go 20 minutes to go to a restaurant. I'll go to a different one. You know, that's going to take me 5 minutes to get there. And disrupting those habits for an extended period of time, the worse it is, the worse those habits are going to change. And then instead of coming to an establishment once a week, you're coming there once a month. So, this changes a lot.
I think there's an opportunity also, I agree. I think there's also an opportunity where communities can come together and maybe help promote some of those businesses that maybe it is harder to get to now, but somehow promote those internally as a community during that time frame. It's asking for something, obviously, to do that. I have seen that done in other communities.
Okay. Kay, did you have a question?
Sir, we have 800 people in the summer. We have about a quarter of them in the winter. So you promoting 200 people is not going to help us survive.
So, in response to yours about the habits, just a little background on me. I used to work for the DOT for 20 years. I've had Shane's job, and he's got a really hard job, and he's doing a great job presenting.
Yeah.
And the city, I'm also a city councilman in the city I live in, so you guys have a really hard job of trying to make the decision to make these agreements and go. So I've also spent 5 years representing the executive director of the Concrete Paving Association, so I work with the contractors every day now, okay? So, again, these construction periods are about 6 weeks in the spring and 8 weeks in the fall. Yes, it's disruptive. These guys have done a great job of explaining 3 or 4 possibilities. These guys have the hard job of figuring out whether they like anything and coming to a consensus and agreeing with these guys. If we wait, I've heard different proposals here tonight about why do we have to do it today? Can we wait 4 years? Can we wait 5 years? Can we wait 10 years? It's going to happen. Traffic patterns are going to increase. Every year that you wait, it's going to be harder to make the same decisions. And unfortunately, or fortunately, your right of way, your access is not going to get easier 5 years from now. You're going to have these exact same conversations 2 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road. The proposal's on the table for some one-lane traffic next fall, 6 weeks the following spring and 8 weeks the following fall to get most of this work done. It's gonna be inconvenient. When you're making these level of improvements, it's going to be inconvenient. It's gonna be hard. We're talking about a 6-week inconvenience and an 8-week inconvenience for the most part. You can stretch this out for years. You guys have the hard job of deciding northbound, southbound, two-way, forcing people next to retaining walls and next to poles and big boats or big lifts and everything else trying to get through this area. Water running down the middle for that 6 weeks in the raining period, which happens in the spring and fall. Is that what you want to maintain that? Those are hard questions to do. These guys are proposing 4 different proposals or options for you. These guys need to hear what you guys have to say so they can agree with them to figure out how we move forward. Do we do it now, or do we have the exact same conversations 4 years, 6 years from now?
And that's kind of why I think, it's important to keep that bridge open. I mean, get the project done, that's fine, I understand that, but we have to keep that bridge open. There's too many things that are getting sacrificed. I know a lot of people that will rather sit in line for 10 minutes at a light than go around for 20 minutes. And I know that because I would do it, and most of my neighbors and fellow community members would do the same. I mean, it's just a human habit.
Neil?
I got a few different questions, but we'll start with 6 weeks. You gonna give up your paycheck and give it to all the businesses for 6 weeks? Because that's what they're gonna do. For you, if your son, daughter, whatever got in an accident down in Arnolds Park, you wanna go 11 miles around on a back road to get them to the hospital? Your child?
Nobody wants any child.
But you guys just say, my point is you guys keep saying it's only a little inconvenience. Somebody gets hurt, dies, it's more than an inconvenience. Figure it out how to keep that bridge open. How'd you do it 20 years ago? I know. And was everybody happy with you then? And how do we know we won't be back here in 20 years again? Or 10? Because maybe the concrete had some disruption then versus now versus then. I like Kevin's idea. Asphalt the bridge every 8 years and call it a day.
Okay, anybody else have anything, any new questions or concerns?
I have one question.
Okay,
I would have one more.
all right, hold on. Sorry, Jim goes first, Butch? Yeah, you goes first.
When we did this last time, we had the light on the bridge wide until they got to that point. You guys, you were here, but do you recall how, it seemed to me it went all the way across the causeway, the light system.
It did.
And in '98, it's changed a lot since then, but we did it once that way. I don't know, I mean, I guess you might be able to make that a bigger swath than you feel. And then the guys that are running the ambulances might, they'll know better than me.
So it wasn't the full length of the causeway, but it had traffic volumes though were significantly lower. And we pretty much shut down 71 during the construction, so the local access was much smaller. So the sheer amount of traffic that was locally there was a fraction of what we're talking about, keeping just the traffic that's going one way. And probably it's even more traffic if you're doing it 2 ways and trying to keep active business. So you're talking about a different circumstance with the sheer volume of traffic we're there. I'm not disagreeing with what you said and how it was, but we're talking about a different animal as far as sheer volumes. So the length that you can have those signals is there. I don't know whether I really want to dig Austin into this or not, but more or less we do have rules of thumb where the length that we have and the traffic volumes are there. That's where we're breaking it down into those 700-800 foot sections. That's based on the traffic volumes of what you'd expect to handle, that of overly large delays, backups by your peak hour traffic that you're there. Can you stretch that? People are willing to sit longer, sit more than one light, particularly at peak hours? Yeah, you can do that. But you have to be just all the more careful that you don't have signal backups getting into another signal. Then it's just a chain reaction of delay that you get there. So can you look at stretching those? Yes. We just got to be cautious on being able to address it.
Butch?
Yeah, one more One more thing that has not been brought up is that in September and October, there's 3,000 to 5,000 boats and boat hoists, some of the boat hoists up to 12, 14 feet wide, going both directions. And April and May, also 3,000 to 5,000 boats and boat hoists going both directions. I can't even comprehend putting those wide loads on 86. I just can't even comprehend doing that, and I would recommend that. What I said the first time is go up there and then say to those people, they're just too snotty up there, we're going to tell them, what the heck, we're not going to build them the road.
That has been a conversation. Why do the boats themselves and the boat hoists are both part of our conversation? It is one of the things that we were concerned about, particularly early on when we had that two lane going at the same time. It's very narrow and it has a lot of operational issues. Even the ones where we go with the signals, we're going to have to be conscientious of that, of keeping those two lanes open because of that. Anytime that we're taking that big of a footprint to have two lanes out there, there's going to be a challenge with it. It's been not discussed. It has been part of the thought process. It is an inconvenience, and so your point that I said the word inconvenience, I don't think I've ever said that it's a minor inconvenience. If I did, we know that that's not true. To go around, but the widest footprint for loads going through is that one direction. If you want wide loads to go through, then it's picking a direction to do the construction with the greatest ease. You want more access, but you're not going to have more inconvenience because wide loads are going to have to go around. There's no other option, but that would be there. Then you're looking at you can be one of the phasing options that's through there that allows them to count traffic. Fortunately, all these options have trade-offs. I wish I could have come here and said, hey, I got the greatest idea in the world last night. I have the silver bullet. Everybody in this room is going to be absolutely happy because it solves every problem that's there. I don't have it. If somebody has it, please see me after the meeting. I'd be more than happy to find out what that answer is that solves our pavement issue, solves our traffic issue, access to the businesses, safety of the public, safety of the workers who are out there, is cost effective. Hey, I want it.
John, I believe you had a question.
So I'm just going to really quickly state what I've heard, what I think I've heard from the group. Nobody wants this to happen, but we all realize that in order for progress to happen and in order for our streets to be maintained, maybe it does need to happen. And if it does need to happen, this is what I heard, and at the risk of being wrong, please let me know. But I've heard we really would like to have two-way traffic. And I think option 3 allows for that two-way traffic with the added benefit of it's going to go faster. Disruption is going to be the least with option 3, except for the causeway. And causeway is going to be the problem. And so what I've heard, again, and let me know if I'm wrong, option 3 is going to prohibit for a portion of time EMS for about 2 days, maybe 3. Let's give them 4 days of time where we can't transport people EMS across the causeway. Is it possible then, this is just me thinking, that we could, through the footbridge, set together some kind of relay, set together some sort of way to get people very quickly to the hospital if they can't go across the causeway. And so really I'm looking at option 3, pulling together everything that I've heard tonight. I might be wrong on some of what I've heard, but option 3 really sounds like it maintains two-way traffic. It gets this thing done as fast and gets the DOT out of our fair as fast as possible. And that's what I'm hearing, and I'd be welcome to hear anybody say that I've heard something wrong, but that's just the way I hear it. And I think that we can really have that two-way traffic. We can really have this thing done as quickly as possible by doing maybe a little bit of a hybrid of option 3 with some one-lane traffic that goes north. That's what I specifically heard, when it needs to be one-way traffic. And I think that really gets us to the point that we need to be at and where we are right now as a group. Right?
You're pretty close.
Okay, I think we...
Yeah, well, I just thought too, I think because Mary's getting ready to wrap us up and it looks like we've kind of worn the room out. And so one final question, I guess, is would it be right to say that you guys are willing to because now, of course, what's next, right? And so we have to sort of come up with a game plan of how we move forward. Does it seem like we're in a position now where a few of us can convene and try to hammer through something everybody can live with, taking, obviously, the input that we've heard tonight? And the other thing I'll say is if you're in the room and you're not really a fan of standing up, I don't blame you. But that doesn't mean that you're not really important to us and that we don't want to hear from you. This is the most people I've ever seen, I think, in a city council meeting. And so that tells me that this is really important. But unless you do speak up and zip us a text or an email or voice your feelings towards us, we can't really be a tool for you guys. We can't really, do, I think, what's in everyone's best interest unless you guys will communicate with us, which is what we desperately want and need. And so, once again, we truly appreciate everybody being here. I can't tell you how important that was to us. And the question then, do you think we're in a position now where we can sit down and maybe hammer out a good hybrid?
And obviously the answer is yes,
right,
that we can do that. Sometimes we have what we call a stakeholder work group that's there. Obviously there's the open meeting whole issue that's there. And it's trying to have people that can have a conversation, and it's just impossible to have a good work group when you have 100 people there.
Sure.
Too many voices to speak. But we definitely get there's people from the community that you think represent the community and the business as well. And I'm going to lean this way a little bit towards you here who know maybe who those are to identify some members of the council or the city staff that you think would be good communities to get together and have a work group of those that are stakeholders that are there. I'll probably try to get something on the books relatively soon. I think the first thing that we would probably have to decide is this being still part of the existing project or pull out? I think that's one discussion I'd recommend there. Is this something you want to breathe or you want to do? If it's going to stay as part of the existing project, then we have to do a lot of work very, very fast. And I'm just going to forewarn that I see that could be a challenge. But we might be able to identify parts depending on which options seem available that we can keep in and then do a second package for the other. It's a possible path that is there. But yeah, I think that we can get a work group together. I'll lean on you, Mary, maybe a little bit to get some information to me of a few people from the council, the city, and representatives of the community think would do well represent the community and work through some of these issues. I would also add into, point a couple people back to the room, your emergency response and those that have concerns for the utilities like the pump station. We want to have those voices in that meeting as well. I do want to pick on you guys a little bit after you pick on me. I'm not sure which way that works, but I think a good conversation there would help a lot. And I'd gladly stick around for that conversation.
I have one.
I'm sorry, yes.
So I want to make sure that no matter what we do here, if it's done right away or if it's done later on, that Arnolds Park and Okoboji are going to be done at the same time so we don't have to go through this twice. Right? I mean, if Arnolds Park decides not to do this, will Okoboji then decide not to do this so that we don't have to go through this again 4 years, 2 years from now?
So I would just say the intent of us from the DOT is to reach out after this to Arnolds Park. We reach out to them prior to this meeting, letting them know that we're going to go over staging options. Obviously, there's some people here that are also from Arnolds Park, and let them know where we are on this part of it. Depending on what the community of Arnold Park wants, I can't guarantee what you just said. I think it would be advantageous if it's done at the same time, or at least there's some overlap of what's done at the same time so we don't stretch it out any longer. But we do have to work and get approval by each community with the work that we do in it, so we want to work with our local partners. I'm going to make the assumption that after this meeting, there's going to be some conversation between the city of Okoboji and the city of Arnolds Park as well. So I can't answer your question there because it's a dynamic situation right now.
Okay, oh, excuse me, Jeff is next.
No, I was raising my hand for Kay.
No, Jeff.
Yeah, the other Jeff, one here.
Oh, hey, Jeff.
If I may,
you were talking about a silver bullet before, and I think the silver bullets that you're looking for are by doing exactly what you're doing here tonight, listening to our elected officials who are listening to our EMT, listening to our clean water projects, listening to our businesses. That's your silver bullet. And I think Representative Wills makes an excellent point in saying this is going to happen in some fashion. And the other side of this that we have to remember, that this is not the price that we pay, but the benefit that we get from being a very successful area that people come to summer after summer, and now shoulder season after shoulder season. And we continue to grow that each year. Our businesses are growing. Look at the census. Our area is growing. We're doing better and better. Part of that is going to be with our road system, and things like this do have to be done. There's many inconveniences, but I think in listening to the people here of the Iowa Great Lakes, hopefully we can make it as seamless as possible and safe as possible for everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Oh, I'm sorry, Kate.
Are you still trying to make the February bid letting?
No, that's been pushed back. Matter of fact, we don't even think we were sitting in a January plan turn-in. I've already let others know that that's not going to happen. I mean, that's too fast. So it would be a February at this point in time that's most likely to do it. And that was only on potential outcome that the conversation was such that, hey, we've looked at the options. We don't think we have to do much modification. We could do that. Obviously, with the conversation here, that's going to be an extreme challenge, I will put it that way. Because we're probably going to be looking at January with the holidays and everything that's coming up before to be able to get together, is my guess. So we'll have to get some dates, get the group together, start working after the feel of that first meeting and see where we are for the February. At this point in time, it's pretty much month by month until we get an answer of what it is. I'm probably going to have some conversations with the programming folks. I know there's even potential this program I have to slide into another fiscal year. So that is a conversation that I'll probably start having here after we speak to Arnolds Park and get a feel from them of what their intent is to see where this project may end up as far as when it might be run.
All right, council, looks like we have some work to do. You guys have been great. I mean, talk about wonderful questions and conversation. I think the easiest way to do this is if you want to be part of it, just to email okobojicity.com or through the website if you might be interested in part of a task force. I mean, I think we all know who we need, you know, everybody's expertise. But just in case there's others that think they may want to, please let us know, because we will get something probably going the first part of January.
And we want to hear from you, for sure.
Yeah, definitely want to hear from you.
Hesitate.
Hi, Herman.
Mayor, I think we should thank you and the City Council for making this meeting available tonight, and thank the DOT for taking the trip up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all very much.
Okoboji broadcast from the studios at historic Arnolds Park Amusement Park is brought to you in part by the Scott Troutman State Farm Agency in Spirit Lake, Quest Wealth Management, a financial advisory practice of Ameriprise Financial Services, advisor Jan Spielman, AJ Spielman, and Erica Wachholz. Ducky's Marine and Motorsports Repair in Spirit Lake. Bank Midwest, dream big, plan wisely, live well. Lakes Regional Healthcare and Avera Partner. Ruthven Locker at the Lake, where carnivores are welcome on Hill Avenue in Spirit Lake. Beck Engineering in Spirit Lake. Be Radiant Laser Skin Studio in the Okoboji Plaza in Okoboji.